Hey y'all! Well, back for another reel-to-reel deck restoration. And this one came from a friend of mine. I was over at their house visiting, and we were going to go out to eat dinner. And we started talking about just random kind of stuff. And I was telling him about my YouTube channel and, that I had gotten into some reel-to-reel stereo stuff. And he was like, I think I still have my old reel-to-reel deck. He was like, I bought it back in probably the 80s and used it to record my little band that we were in at the time and made some tapes and stuff. And then it quit working and I just put it out in the garage. And so we went out there and looked at it, and lo and behold, reel-to-reel deck. And this is actually a Dokorder, which, doing some research, I think this is a branch of Sharp, which people have probably heard of. I'd never heard of Dokorder before. This is a Stereo 8100, and all the parts were there. I mean, it looked complete, and the spindles weren't bent and stuff, and so I said, yeah, let me take a look at it and see if I can fix it. And he was kind of like, yeah, you can just have it. I don't, get it out of my house. And so brought it home, and it's been sitting there for about 6 months, and I did an initial kind of assessment of it, and the buttons were intermittent, like you'd push them one time and nothing would happen, and you push it 2 or 3 times and it would start working. And I just assumed that it was probably oxidized up, which after seeing the inside makes sense. And it looked like the main belt was broken, which is what kills most of these tape decks. And so I did some research, and it wasn't real easy to find, but found a replacement belt, or one that's supposed to fit this deck. And they didn't have the counter belt for the little, counter up here, but it seems to be working, and the belt's still there. So I think we can fix this with the main drive belt. But it does have other issues related to it sitting up. It was stored out in a garage, with unconditioned space. And here in Atlanta, get pretty high humidity. We're not in salt air like in Florida, which probably would have just totally destroyed it. But the humidity has taken its toll. Plus, when I first looked at it, this was the back cover, and it's got these little grill things here, and you can see this one's punched out. And I thought, well, maybe that was just, got bumped into something and knocked those out. Well, it looks like that was a mouse or a rat chewed through those and got inside it. And there wasn't a nest inside, but I did find some rat poop, and there's some corrosion on these side panels, which I don't know if it's rat pee or just from being out in the humidity. Luckily, I don't see any wires chewed through, which sometimes when a mouse or something gets into a device like this, they decide to start chewing the wires up, and it pretty much totals them out. So luckily I don't see any of that. So the first step is I'm going to take it outside and blow all the nasty fur or whatever this is inside it out. And then I'm going to clean the boards up. This is with some CRC QD electronic cleaner, which I've used this stuff on other stuff in the past, like automotive type electronics. I've never used it on this sort of boards, but these are so grimy and got so much gunk on them, I think it's going to take some kind of solvent to clean them out. It does say it's safe for sensitive electronics, and it's plastic safe. And so we're going to blow it out first, and I do have this little vacuum cleaner looking blower device that I use. And it's a lot better than buying those little cans of duster stuff. Plus the chemicals in that duster stuff are just, I don't know if you've seen any of the videos about people huffing that stuff, but I don't want to be anywhere near the chemicals that come out of those things. And so I've got this vacuum cleaner looking thing. If I can find it on Amazon, I'll put a link below. Then after I get the boards cleaned up and get all the gunk cleaned out of it, I'm going to go through with some Deoxit D5, and I'm going to pull the switch boards up so I can get the back sides of the switch and flood them with this stuff, and then cycle the switches and hopefully get those cleaned out. Got to clean out all the pots. Then going to use some just isopropyl alcohol to clean up the rest of the tape guides and all that stuff as best as I can, which I know there's specific head cleaners, but for general use, this stuff works okay. So, got to clean up the tape path, put the new belt in, and then see where we're at. And as you can see, we've got all the covers and everything off. They were basically just pulling the screws out. You do have to pull these two little guide pins that hold this in place to get the front cover off. So if you're working on this specific unit. And then the only other thing you have to take off is the pinch roller. And make sure you watch and save the little washers on each side of this pinch roller. Now this one doesn't have guide rollers or anything. Also going to come back up and lube all the mechanism and clean all it up, which we'll do in the video. I'll show you how to do that. But let me go clean this thing out, and so we can get started fixing up this tape deck. Okay, so after I cleaned up the inside of this thing and blew out the circuit boards and stuff, what I thought might be rat poop turned out to be just chunks of the belt that had disintegrated and fallen down into the circuit board and then kind of melted. So we were able to get all that cleaned up with a combination of some alcohol and the electronics cleaner, so that was good. So the next thing we had to deal with is this little guy here was real sticky, and so I popped this clip off and pulled this off, cleaned that off, lubricated it, and put that back together, and you can see it works nice and free now. Same thing with this. This was real sticky, so I put a little lube here and here on these 2 points, and popped this clip off and kind of wiggled this thing up and down a little bit, and got this thing freed up. Same thing with the one over here. This one was all sticky, and got it lubed up here on the pivots, and it's working good. Cleaned up the tape path. It was an absolute mess. There was a bunch of globs of sticky tape all stuck to this stuff, and got it all cleaned up the tape pads. This looks like a roller, but it's just a guide. It doesn't spin. So got that cleaned up. That all turned out good. So the next thing I did was I took this loose, this little switch array, so I could flip it down, and then took some of this Deox D5, sprayed it in the switches, and then cycled them a bunch of times, just, like that. Sprayed some more Deox in it, cycled them, and then blew it out with some air, and then put some Deox in on this side, same thing, cycled it and blew it out with air, and they're all working now like they're supposed to. Now I am going to have to clean out these 2 pots, especially this one. I can see when I twist it, the VU meter goes crazy. So this one's got a bunch of, dust corrosion, whatever in it. So I'm going to unscrew this one, kind of push it back so I can get to the port in it. Again, spray some Deox in it and cycle it back and forth, and do it for both of these. The ones over on this side seem fine, but we may give them a little spritz too while we're in there. All these switches work fine. These work good. I went ahead and sprayed a little Deox, like in this little joint right there. Same thing, and then blew the air out, and all that worked. So I powered this thing up, and when I cycle the buttons, it goes into every cycle that it's supposed to. This table will spin up here. This one will spin the other direction on rewind. When I hit play, this one spins, but the problem is the capstan isn't spinning. And I was hoping that it was just a broken belt, because the belt is just disintegrated. But now we have another problem. This main drive motor isn't spinning. And I was pretty sure I checked that before, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I just saw that the belt was missing and assumed that was the problem. So I started investigating it, and let me show you on the other side of this tape deck. So here's the main drive motor, and I followed the wires over here. It says 13.5 volts. And so I started checking these terminals over here. the power that's coming from down here, down below, is, let's see if I can flip up here and show you that. This board down here, there's the power supply board, or one of them. And the power is coming up here. And the terminal up here measures 20 volts. But there's nothing going out to the motor. And it looks like it's got a sensor, which has 5 volts on it going to the motor. But the two main power wires going to the motor, they don't have any voltage on them. Even, when it's energized and should run. So, I pulled this board loose, and there's this little transistor right here is heat sinked to this. So I had to take the screw out and the little spacer that insulates it. And then I noticed there's a fuse. And that fuse is blown. And I'm not sure if, my hope is when the belt went bad, this motor was like stalled. And it drew so much current that it popped this fuse. I'm not super well versed in dealing with electronics like this. I don't see any like blown caps or roasted parts. So I'm hoping that it just popped this fuse, and replacing this fuse is going to get us back in business. So let me go do that, and let's see what happens and keep our fingers crossed. So I soldered a new fuse in, little half amp, 250 volt fuse. I'm glad it was a really small value. And now when I turn on the deck, there's the motor. But let me see if I can get this mic close enough where you can hear it. It doesn't sound real happy. And I'm not sure if it just needs some lubrication. I'm going to take the motor out of the deck, and then here's the speed. And the speed changes when I do the speed. So I'm going to pull the motor out, take the pulley off, and see if I can lubricate the bushings in it and see if that calms it down. So let me see if I can revive this motor, and I'll report back in a little bit on our success with that. But at least now we've got the main capstan motor running, so that's a bonus. So again, we replaced the fuse, which is right here, and you can actually get to this fuse without taking this board off. There's a solder joint here and here, and put a half amp fuse in there. Like I said, the motor started running. Let it run for about an hour, and before that, I took this black cover off, and there was another small metal cover on the back of the motor that I was able to pry up and off, and there's a couple small holes there. It's not directly on the bushing, but it was right above it. And so I put some oil there, put some oil on the front bushing behind the pulley, and then let this thing run about an hour on high speed, and it calmed down. It actually sounds pretty good now. And so went ahead and put the belt on. On this deck, it's super easy. You loosen this one up, loosen that up, slide this little brace out of the way, which is the end plate for this flywheel, and you just roll the belt on it. Now, one thing I did notice when I fired it up, the pulley looks like this. And when I first fired it up, the belt was running right at the outer edge of the pulley. And I thought, well, let me flip the belt over and just turn the belt 180 degrees and see if that's what's causing this. And it wasn't. So what I did was I put a couple of washers behind these two top screws up here and the chassis or the standoffs, so it tilted the top of the motor back just a little bit, and tightened that back down, and now the belt's running right in the center of the pulley. So I'm happy with that, and doing that also made the motor quieter. So I guess it centered up the load, or the thrust load, on the drive motor. So I'm happy with that. And as you can see, there we go. It's a nice even hum. And so, yeah, I'm happy with that. We got all the motors working. Now on the motors on the front, If you look underneath here, you'll see a little small clear plastic tube coming up from the motor on each one of these. And I had to come in with like this flat blade screwdriver and kind of push it over a little bit going through here till I could get to the end of that tube. And then I came in with just a little bit of oil on the end of like a screwdriver or something like this, and just let the drip hit the end of that tube, and the capillary action will suck it in, and that puts a little bit of oil on these two motors. I did get some of this deoxit and flooded the adjustable volume pots and worked them back and forth and then blew them out with some air. And so the last adjustment here is the height of the reel decks. And what you need to do is put a reel on here, sight down the flanges down to this guide here. And you want to have the reel centered on this guide so that the tape path is straight and the tape doesn't get twisted as it goes across the heads. Every deck that I've worked on needed this adjusted, and almost universally they're pushed in. Likely the deck is fallen over on these spindles, and it shoves those reel decks into, or the reel tables into the deck. And there's a Allen wrench you can see right here that goes in behind this reel table, and you loosen up the two set screws, and then you adjust this until the reels line up. And then you also want to make sure that when you put the front cover on, put it down, that this is sitting up proud of this surface so the reels don't hit the front cover. So get those adjusted, then you're ready to put the front cover on, and we'll be ready to put some tape in this thing and see what it does. Well, we got it all put back together, and mechanically everything's working great. So let me show you where we're at here. Turn the power on, come over here, we hit play, and there we go. We got the high speed working, there's the low speed, everything seems to be happy. But we did have one small problem. The right channel on playback isn't working. And not sure what's going on. I did try hooking up a input source, and when I go to the source button versus the tape, the right channel is playing. So that's telling me that at least there's a connection to the output jack, so that's not the problem. And I'm not sure if there's a problem with the switch here. I think it's this one down here that goes from the tape to the source, or if there's some other issue. I hope it doesn't have a dead tape head. Have to get into that at a later date. And so yeah, that'll be a project for a future video. I haven't done a lot of solid state repair and diagnosis kind of stuff in the past, and so that's something I need to learn more about. And I think I'm going to tackle my Akai 4000D deck that's got noisy transistors first, because I do have a repair manual for it with the schematics and everything. I've got no info on this deck. If anybody knows where I can find a manual for this Dokorder, I think it's an 8100, that would be fantastic. I hate to go into this thing blind, but at least one channel's working. So, I will be able to trace through, okay, this channel is working, is doing this, and then where's the signal disappearing in the other channel? And we'll get into that, how to diagnose that sort of thing in a future video. But for now, pretty happy with the way this turned out. I do still have to adjust this reel table. I got it a little too far out and the tape's dragging on the inside of it, so when I go back inside it, I'll get that adjusted. But otherwise, mechanically, it's all working like it's supposed to. So that was a success. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this mechanical restoration on this Dokorder. And If you enjoyed this or you're enjoying my content, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters, the other folks that support the channel in various ways. And until the next video, have a nice day.